The sun hung low over the dusty plains, casting long, sharp shadows across the small frontier town of Black Ridge. Wooden buildings leaned slightly with age, their paint faded by decades of scorching winds and relentless sun. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made men grip their revolvers a little tighter and watch every movement with suspicion. Horses stamped nervously in the corral, and the distant howl of a coyote carried like a warning through the canyons. They had him restrained, bound to a sturdy post in the center of town. His chest heaved, but his eyes burned with a fire that refused to be quenched. He was no ordinary captive. Even in chains, there was a presence about him, a weight that made every man around him uneasy. The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man with a crooked star pinned to his chest, barked orders, confident that this one was finally tamed. But in the quiet of his heartbeat, a storm was gathering. The townsfolk lingered nearby, peeking from behind crates, shutters, and the dusty corners of the saloon. They whispered tales of the man who had come from the northern plains, a warrior whose skills with a blade and knowledge of the land were legendary. Few had seen him fight and lived to tell the story, and those who did spoke with a mix of fear and awe. They called him the Hidden Warrior, for he moved like smoke through the canyons, appearing where no one expected, striking with precision, then vanishing again. Now, bound and watched by armed men, he seemed vulnerable, but the spark in his eyes promised that danger was far from over. Around the edges of the square, the men who had captured him glanced at each other, certain that the work was done. Their leader, a man known for his ruthlessness and sharp temper, tapped his boots against the wooden planks impatiently. "Let's make sure the ropes are tight," he growled, his voice carrying over the quiet murmurs of the crowd. "We don't want any surprises." He thought himself clever, never suspecting that the one he mocked was a storm contained in human flesh, waiting for the right moment to explode. The Hidden Warrior did not speak. He tilted his head slightly, studying the faces around him. Each man had a weakness, an opening, and he memorized them all. His mind raced faster than the summer wind sweeping across the prairie, each second bringing him closer to a plan that would turn the tables. Though his body was restrained, his spirit roared freely, and the townsfolk could feel it even from a distance. Some shifted uneasily, wondering if they had made a mistake in standing witness to this capture. Above, the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of blood red and gold. Dust swirled in the streets, masking the movement of shadows that crept along walls and barrels. Something was stirring beyond the town's edge, movement that was deliberate, silent, and deadly. A pair of hawks circled overhead, circling the scene as if aware of the violence about to unfold. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The sheriff signaled for 2 more men to tighten the ropes. But as they approached, the Hidden Warrior's fingers flexed against the cords. Every fiber of rope held back a strength that could shatter bone. He had been caught before, yes, but never broken. And he had a score to settle, a promise etched into his memory, a fire that demanded release. The crowd leaned forward slightly, drawn into the tension, feeling that the air itself had thickened with anticipation. In the shadows of an alley, a figure watched silently, hidden beneath the brim of a weathered hat. A scout from a neighboring ridge, he had tracked the Hidden Warrior for days, waiting for the right signal. He knew what the restrained man was capable of, and he knew the moment would come soon when chaos would erupt like wildfire. But which side would survive the first blow was anyone's guess. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum, counting down to a confrontation that no one in Black Ridge could have foreseen. The wind carried whispers of old legends, tales of men who struck fear into the hearts of armies, of those who moved unseen yet left devastation in their wake. The townsfolk had heard the stories, dismissed them as myth, but as the sun sank and shadows deepened, the air crackled with the promise of violence. Something ancient and unstoppable stirred in the restrained figure, and those who watched felt an instinctive chill. A stray dog barked in the distance, cutting through the silence like a warning shot. The Hidden Warrior's head tilted slightly, listening, reading the sounds of the town. Each creak, each shuffle, each distant laugh was a part of the puzzle. He did not panic. He never did. Patience was his weapon, and the right moment would come. When it did, no one would be ready. The men around him chuckled quietly, exchanging bets on how long it would take for him to break, as if fate itself were a wager. The leader tightened his grip on the reins of his temper, trying to mask his unease with authority. But the glint in the restrained man's eyes told a different story, a story of revenge, skill, and an unyielding will. The town square, which had seemed so calm just moments ago, now felt like a powder keg, each breath a spark, waiting for ignition. The sun finally slipped below the horizon, casting Black Ridge into a twilight filled with shadows and uncertainty. Lanterns flickered on, their soft glow painting long, trembling shapes across the street. The hidden warrior's muscles tensed. Every nerve was alive, every thought precise. Was a man contained, yes, but never conquered. And tonight, that truth would be revealed in a way that no one, not even the most ruthless of his captors, could have predicted. A hush fell over the crowd as a sudden, distant sound cracked through the town, the sharp report of a gunshot echoing from the ridge above. Heads snapped toward the sound, hearts pounding in unison, eyes searching for the source. The restrained man's lips curved ever so slightly, a shadow of a smile. His moment had come. The hidden warrior was ready, and the world would soon see why no one could truly restrain him. As the sheriff barked frantic orders, the ropes seemed to tremble. The wind whispered through the cracks in the buildings, and the first signs of chaos began to stir. In that moment, every onlooker knew one thing for certain: Black Ridge would never be the same again. And then, silence. The stage was set. The players were in place. And the hidden warrior waited, coiled like a panther in the dark, for the perfect strike that would leave the town reeling. The lanterns flickered across the town square, casting twisted shadows that danced on the weathered walls. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke and dust, and every footstep sounded louder than it should, like a warning to the ears that dared to listen. The hidden warrior, bound to the post, let his gaze drift across the familiar faces of the town, but it was the shadows beyond that truly held his attention. Each figure that lingered in the dark seemed to hold a secret, a history tied to him, whether they knew it or not. The sheriff, a man named Clayton Graves, shifted nervously. He had spent his life commanding fear and respect, but tonight even his boots felt heavy, like they were dragging him toward an unknown reckoning. Clayton was a man who prided himself on control, on predicting every outcome. Yet there was something in the hidden warrior's stillness that unsettled him to his core. Clayton had heard stories from the old hunters and trapper folk whispers of a man who could disappear in plain sight, strike without warning, and leave nothing but echoes. And now that man was here, in his town, seemingly vulnerable, yet frighteningly alive. From the crowd, a tall, rugged figure emerged. His name was Silas Kane, a tracker whose eyes could read the land better than any map. He had hunted wolves and outlaws alike, yet the hidden warrior's reputation had always made him cautious. Silas had followed the man for weeks, tracing signs in the sand, broken branches, and footprints in dried riverbeds. He had witnessed the aftermath of the warrior's attacks, burning wagons, scattered riders, and a trail of chaos that seemed almost supernatural. Silas knew that tonight, in Black Ridge, the balance of power would be tested. The townsfolk whispered behind their hands. Some spoke of the warrior's origin, though none knew the truth. He had come from the northern highlands, where the land was jagged and unyielding, where men were forged by snowstorms and hunger. They said he was raised by the last of a vanished tribe, trained in the old ways' silent movement, deadly precision, and an instinct for survival that bordered on preternatural. Others claimed he had learned his skills in battlefields far from these plains, that he had fought under banners no one could name. Whatever the truth, the stories agreed on one thing: the hidden warrior could not be tamed. The wind shifted, and with it came a faint, distant sound, a hoofbeat, steady and deliberate. Clayton's hand moved to his revolver instinctively, but his instincts betrayed him. Sound came again, closer now, accompanied by the creak of leather and the faint rustle of a rider approaching the town from the eastern ridge. Clayton's men tensed, gripping their weapons, eyes scanning the hills, but the rider remained cloaked in shadow, a phantom in the failing light. The hidden warrior's head tilted ever so slightly, listening. Though his body was bound, his senses were alert to every nuance of the night. He could feel the ground vibrating under distant steps, smelled the faint scent of horses and sweat, and hear the heartbeat of someone daring to come close. Whoever approached was either foolish or desperate, and the hidden warrior found both scenarios amusing in a quiet, dangerous way. Clayton barked a command, sending 2 deputies running toward the east gate, their boots hammering the planks with anxious rhythm. Yet even as they moved, the hidden warrior's eyes followed the shadows creeping along the edge of town. There was a message hidden in the movement, a pattern only he could read. In and he knew the moment it arrived, the plan he had been weaving in his mind would unfold like a predator striking. Silas Kane stepped closer to the restrained man, lowering his voice so only the hidden warrior could hear. "You've made many enemies," he said, a mixture of respect and warning in his tone. "Not all of them forget. Some hunt, some lie in wait. Some like Clayton. They think chains can hold what cannot be caught." The hidden warrior's eyes flicked toward him, expression calm but dangerous. He did not speak, but the intensity in his gaze was enough. Silas nodded slowly, understanding that words were unnecessary. The tension between them was layered with history-on unspoken acknowledgement that some battles were fought with more than weapons, and some victories were won long before the first strike. Meanwhile, in the shadowed alleyways, other figures stirred. Men loyal to Clayton, men who had sworn to uphold the law of the land, whispered among themselves. They spoke of a bounty, of revenge, of justice, but their voices carried a tremor of fear. The hidden warrior had arrived without warning, but he had left scars on many lives, scars that could not be healed by chains or threats. Each man around him had a secret, a reason to fear, a reason to hope, and a reason to wonder if tonight would be their last chance to witness the power of a man who refused to yield. The sky darkened fully, stars beginning to pierce the twilight. The town seemed smaller now, every building looming like a wall of potential danger. Horses stamped nervously in the corral, reflecting the unease that had settled over Black Ridge. Clayton paced near the post, muttering curses under his breath, while the hidden warrior's breathing remained steady, deceptively calm. Every second stretched, every sound amplified, as if the night itself had slowed to watch what was about to happen. A sudden rustle came from the western ridge, drawing the attention of several men. Clayton turned sharply, revolver raised, but the hidden warrior anticipated the movement. Even in his bound state, he knew that chaos was not random, it was deliberate, crafted by those who underestimated him. A small figure appeared on the ridge, silhouetted by the last sliver of moonlight. The figure moved with purpose, yet the hidden warrior understood that this was only the beginning of a larger game. Stories of the hidden warrior had always painted him as unstoppable, yet what made him truly dangerous was his patience. He waited for the right moment, read every heartbeat, and calculated each motion with precision. Clayton, Silas, and the townsfolk did not realize that every whisper, every shadow, every tremor in the ground had been noted and catalogued in the warrior's mind. A strike would come, yes, but it would not be random. It would be a statement, a lesson for those who thought they could contain a force born of the wild plains and sharpened by countless battles. The lanterns flickered once more, casting long, trembling shadows over the square. The townsfolk held their breath, uncertain who would move first, who would falter, and who would witness history unfold. Horses neighed, distant crows called, and somewhere on the ridge, the faint sound of movement whispered like a warning. The hidden warrior flexed his wrists against the ropes, feeling the fibers strain, testing the limits of their strength. Every muscle, every thought, every ounce of resolve was coiled and ready. And yet, despite all the preparation, one truth remained. The night was still young. And Black Ridge was only the first stage in a larger story that had yet to reveal itself. The townsfolk could sense it, their eyes darting to every corner, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Clayton cursed again, trying to maintain control. But even he could not mask the growing dread that something far beyond his authority was about to arrive. From the shadows, unseen eyes watched. Old alliances, hidden motives, and secret vendettas hung in the air like smoke. Every player in this unfolding drama carried a story, a reason for being here, and a desire that might clash violently with the hidden warrior's plans. He had arrived in Black Ridge with a purpose, but the threads of fate were weaving around him, pulling strangers and allies alike into a tapestry of suspense and danger. The wind rose suddenly, carrying with it the scent of distant pine and gunpowder. The hidden warrior's eyes narrowed. Somewhere in the night, movement signaled that the first part of the plan had begun. Chains could bind flesh, but they could not restrain a spirit sharpened by hardship, battle, and unyielding will. Every man in the square could feel it now, the tension coiled like a spring, ready to unleash fury, cunning, and precision upon anyone foolish enough to miscalculate the threat before them. Clayton raised his voice, calling orders, but the words were swallowed by the thickening night. Lanterns swung in their iron holders, casting light that trembled and fractured across faces. Silas Kane's hand rested lightly on his pistol, ready, knowing that the coming moments could change everything. The hidden warrior's breathing was steady, his gaze fixed on the shadows, calculating, waiting, always waiting. And beyond the edges of the town, unseen forces moved closer, drawn by the same promise of confrontation, mystery, and the revelation of a man who could not be restrained. The stage was set, the players were poised, and the first whispers of a storm approached. Black Ridge would bear witness to events that no one could yet understand, and the hidden warrior's presence was only the beginning. The night carried secrets, the shadows hid intentions, and the square, tense and silent, held its breath for a story that was far from over. The night had grown heavier, pressing down on Black Ridge like a living thing. Lanterns swayed in the sudden gusts that whispered through the streets, carrying dust and the faint scent of gunpowder. The hidden warrior's eyes never left the edges of the town. Though bound, he could feel the rhythm of every heartbeat nearby, every footstep, every shift in the shadows. He knew that danger and opportunity often walked hand in hand, and tonight they were circling him both openly and unseen. Clayton Graves, the sheriff, tried to mask the unease tightening his chest. He barked orders, sent men running to patrol rooftops, and checked corners where shadows lingered too long. His authority was like a fragile rope, fraying with every silent second. Deep inside, he knew he had misjudged the situation. A man like the hidden warrior could not simply be restrained. Yet his pride and his badge demanded he act as if control remained in his hands. Clayton's gaze flicked nervously to Silas Kane, who stood slightly apart from the others, silent but alert. Silas observed the scene with a cold clarity. He had hunted men and beasts alike, tracked the impossible, and survived situations others would call fatal. Yet even he had been careful to approach the hidden warrior with respect, knowing that to misread him was to court disaster. Silas's thoughts drifted for a moment to the northern ridges where the hidden warrior had trained, a place he had never seen but had learned about through whispers and legends. Men spoke of ice-slicked cliffs, hidden caves, and rituals that sharpened skill and will alike. That knowledge alone explained why this man seemed untouchable, even bound in the center of a town square. From another angle, a rider crested the eastern ridge, cloaked in shadow. His name was Gideon Vark, a bounty hunter whose reputation for brutality was matched only by his cunning. He had been tracking the hidden warrior for weeks, drawn by a promise of wealth, vengeance, or both. Gideon had a reputation for thinking 3 steps ahead, yet he knew instinctively that tonight he would be part of a larger puzzle. He slowed his horse near the tree line, observing the square, trying to predict how the warrior would move, what traps might already lie in wait. Even from this distance, the energy in the square spoke to him, a silent warning that a storm was already brewing. Inside the saloon, the townsfolk whispered among themselves, faces pale in the lantern light. They had arrived hoping to witness justice, or perhaps some small victory for their sheriff. But the energy in the air was different, unpredictable, dangerous. Some muttered about the hidden warrior's past, counting tales of raids and disappearances, while others wondered if the stories were exaggerated. Every tale carried a kernel of truth. He was fast, clever, and relentless. He had been described as a ghost, a shadow, a force that moved like wind through the canyons, striking without warning and leaving chaos in his wake. A young woman, Mara Thorne, slipped through the crowd, unnoticed. Her father had once crossed paths with the hidden warrior in the northern highlands and had lived to tell a story that kept Mara awake at night. She carried her own purpose tonight, a message, perhaps, or an attempt to sway events in her favor, noting a town square, noting every movement, every tense posture, every man who thought he was in control. Mara knew that power in Black Ridge was shifting, and she intended to find where her influence could matter most before it was too late. The wind shifted again, carrying the faint smell of iron and leather, signaling the approach of another presence. From the western ridge, a rider emerged, not with the stealth of Gideon, but with the precision of someone who had trained for years in silence. This was Enoch Derrick, a scout who had once served alongside the hidden warrior in the far northern campaigns. Unlike Gideon, Enoch held no bounty or personal grudge. He came because of loyalty, because the balance had been threatened, because he knew the warrior's skill and the danger of underestimating him. Enoch slowed near the tree line, observing silently, waiting to see how the first moves would unfold. Inside the square, Clayton's men grew restless. their nerves frayed with each second that passed without the warrior breaking, without the predictable submission they expected. Each rope seemed more fragile, each shadow more menacing. The hidden warrior's posture remained calm, almost serene. But the fire in his eyes betrayed the patience that had carried him through countless battles. The townsfolk began to murmur again, small ripples of fear spreading. They felt the tension, even if they did not understand it. The hidden warrior thought back to the northern highlands, to the training that had shaped him. Nights spent moving silently across frozen cliffs, days spent hunting with only instinct as a guide. Every fight he had survived had taught him patience, observation, and timing. He understood that restraint was temporary. Opportunity was eternal if one had the will to seize it. And tonight that will was stronger than the ropes that bound him. A sudden noise drew every eye toward the saloon alley. A crate toppled over, scattering coins and tools across the ground. Clayton's men turned instantly, guns raised, only to find nothing. But the hidden warrior had seen it all, the shift of shadows, the subtle change in the air. He knew that movement meant intent, that someone was approaching the square with a purpose, and that purpose was now part of the unfolding web of tension. From the eastern ridge, Gideon Vark adjusted his aim, considering his options. He had faced dangerous men before, but this was different. The warrior's reputation was real, tangible, almost palpable. He could feel it even from a distance. Gideon's mind raced: strike now, wait, circle around, provoke a reaction, but each choice carried risk. The ropes that bound the hidden warrior might be temporary, but the consequences of miscalculating the first strike could be fatal. In the town square, Mara Thorne edged closer to the post where the hidden warrior was restrained. Her presence was almost unnoticed, yet it carried weight. She had her own knowledge, her own motivations, and she understood more than most about the balance between power and fear. She could see the tension in Clayton's hands, the readiness in Silas Kane's posture, the calculated patience in the warrior's eyes. She realized that Black Ridge was a chessboard, and every player was preparing for moves that had yet to be made. Above, the wind rose sharply, scattering debris and flickering lanterns. The hidden warrior flexed his wrists against the cords once more, feeling the slight give in the ropes, testing his limits. His mind worked faster than any blade could move, cataloging every shadow, every footstep, every heartbeat. He was planning, calculating, waiting. The night itself seemed to lean closer, listening, anticipating. And yet, for all the tension building in the square, there were still forces unseen. Figures in the shadows, allies and enemies alike, moved with intent. Some had watched from rooftops, some had waited on ridges, and some had listened from darkened alleys. Every one of them had a stake, a plan, a reason for being here. The hidden warrior's arrival had drawn threads from distant lands, and now they converged in Black Ridge, twisting and pulling in directions none of the townsfolk could predict. Clayton clenched his jaw, frustration and fear warring within him. Could feel control slipping, and yet he could not back down without losing face, without showing weakness. Every man around him sensed the change of the wind, the shifting shadows. The intensity of the restrained figure at the center of the square. It was as if the night itself had turned sentient, and the hidden warrior was its pulse. The distant ridges groaned under the sound of hooves and shifting weight. Gideon considered advancing. Enoch remained patient, and Silas Kane observed all of them, calculating potential outcomes. Mara edged closer, silently noting every detail. The hidden warrior watched them all, silent and still, yet every fiber of his being was alive. Aware, ready to act when the precise moment arrived. Time seemed to stretch, each second echoing like a drumbeat in the tense stillness. The ropes held, barely. The town square remained filled with whispers of fear, awe, and anticipation. And in that moment, everyone understood one undeniable truth. Nothing here would be simple. Nothing would be contained, and the first move would change everything. The night held its breath, the shadows waited, and the hidden warrior prepared. Black Ridge had become a stage for a conflict far larger than any one man or town, and the players were poised for action. But no one yet knew who would strike first, who would falter, and who would survive the coming storm. Every figure in the town, every shadow on the ridges, every whisper in the dark, now played a part in a story that was far from resolved. The tension built, coiling tighter with each heartbeat, as the hidden warrior remained restrained, yet entirely untamed, waiting for the moment when all patience, skill, and power would converge in a single, decisive movement. The night pressed down on Black Ridge like a living, breathing entity. Every shadow seemed alive, twisting along the walls and corners, waiting for the first spark to ignite chaos. The lanterns swung violently in the wind, casting fleeting light across anxious faces. Clayton Graves paced, trying to control his men, but the hidden warrior's calm gaze never left the edges of the square. Though bound to the post, every motion of his body screamed potential energy, coiled and ready. Silas Kane moved silently among the deputies, whispering warnings, though few could hear him. His eyes scanned every roof, every alley, every ridge beyond the town. He had been close to the hidden warrior once before, in a far northern canyon where the warrior had saved him from certain death. That memory reminded Silas that skill and patience could be as lethal as any weapon. He could see the threads of tension tightening around Black Ridge, and he knew that once the first move came, there would be no turning back. From the eastern ridge, Gideon Vark shifted his position, adjusting his aim, calculating distances. His horse stamped, uneasy under the rider's careful control, but Gideon's mind raced faster than any trigger finger could act. He had followed legends, whispers of the hidden warrior's impossible skill, and he knew that one misstep tonight could cost him everything. The wind carried the faint scent of iron and sweat, mixing with the dust of the streets below. Every breath felt like a warning, every sound a signal. Mara Thorne pressed herself against the post of a nearby building, watching silently. Her mind was sharp, her instincts honed by years of observing power struggles and survival. She had her reasons for being here, motives entwined with the warrior's past and the fate of the town. As she studied the scene, she saw more than the restrained man at the center. She saw Clayton's faltering authority, the tension coiling in Silas Kane, and the careful patience of Enoch Derrick, waiting unseen in the shadows. Every figure had a part to play, and every second brought the inevitable clash closer. The wind rose suddenly, carrying whispers from the ridges and the alleys, scattering dust and rattling shutters. The hidden warrior's eyes flicked toward the sound, calculating. Though restrained, he sensed every heartbeat, every intention, every shadow that might conceal a threat or an ally. He had been here before, in situations that seemed impossible, and had always turned the odds to his favor. He flexed against the ropes, testing their limits, noting the weakness in the knots and the strain in the fibers. Soon, very soon, everything would shift. Clayton's voice rang out across the square, a mixture of command and desperation. "Stay alert. Watch every corner. Do not let him." His words caught in his throat as a sudden shadow moved across the rooftops. Men followed instinctively with raised weapons, but the movement vanished before anyone could identify it. The hidden warrior's eyes glimmered with awareness, knowing that the first strike would come from an angle no one expected. From the western ridge, Enoch Derrick observed the square, every line of sight, every angle of approach. He had once fought alongside the hidden warrior, known his skill, and trusted his judgment implicitly. Yet tonight, even Enoch could not fully anticipate the chaos that was gathering. The ropes might hold the warrior's body, but never his mind, his instinct, his deadly intent. In that stillness, Enoch sensed the storm about to break. The townsfolk murmured nervously, their whispers growing louder as shadows deepened. Some gripped railings and crates, others clutched family members or weapons they barely knew how to use. Fear had become a living presence, mingling with anticipation. Feeding off the tension that radiated from the restrained warrior, every pair of eyes seemed drawn to him, even those who did not understand why. The hidden warrior was no mere man. He was a force of nature contained by ropes and wood, and the town could feel it. A distant bark shattered the fragile quiet. Horses neighed and stamped in the corral, a warning of movement beyond the edge of town. Clayton cursed, sending deputies scrambling, but the hidden warrior's gaze was already on the ridge where the sound had come. He knew that this was no accident. Every approach had a purpose, every sound a signal. His mind raced through possibilities, calculating outcomes with the precision of a predator waiting to strike. Mara took a cautious step forward, noting the tension in Clayton's jaw. The restless movements of Silas, and the silent posture of Enoch. She understood that the night's events were more than a simple confrontation. They were a convergence of histories, motives, and skills. She had her own part to play, but timing was everything. Any premature movement could tip the balance, and she knew that patience was as lethal as action. The wind shifted again, carrying a faint clatter from the alley behind the saloon. A crate toppled, coins rolling across the dusty floor. Clayton's men turned sharply, but nothing moved. The hidden warrior's eyes flicked toward the alley, reading the subtle signs, the weight of a footstep, the change in air pressure, the telltale shadow. The first threads of chaos had already begun weaving themselves through the town, invisible to most, yet entirely obvious to him. Above, the stars seemed to watch silently. The ridges on every side of Black Ridge held unseen eyes-watchers, hunters, allies, enemies. Gideon considered advancing, testing the waters, but hesitation gnawed at him. Enoch remained patient, waiting for the right signal. Even Silas Kane felt the tight coil of anticipation, knowing that the coming moments would demand split-second decisions. And in the center of it all, the hidden warrior remained still, restrained yet untouchable, waiting for the perfect convergence. The ropes around his wrists shifted slightly under his subtle movements. Every twist, every flex, was calculated. He had studied every man in the square, memorized every potential opening. The sheriff's impatience, the deputy's nerves, the townsfolk's fear, all played into his strategy. The first moment of action would decide the pace, the rhythm, and the stakes. Clayton shouted again, his voice cracking with tension. "Do not let him escape. Hold your ground." But even as he barked, he knew the calm surface of authority was faltering. The hidden warrior's reputation was real, tangible, almost magnetic. It drew the eyes, the fear, and the anticipation of everyone in the town square. And in that magnetic pull, the first threads of the coming storm began to tighten. Marathorn pressed against the wooden post, noticing the subtle signs of the warrior's intent, the shift of his weight against the ropes, the sharp glimmer in his eyes, the quiet patience that hinted at imminent movement. Her pulse quickened, and she understood more clearly than ever that this night would mark a turning point. Black Ridge would never be the same, no matter which side emerged in the first act of chaos. Gideon Vark finally made his move, edging his horse closer to the town, calculating a strike that could tip the balance in his favor. Enoch Derrick remained hidden, observing silently, ready to intervene if necessary. Silas Kane whispered to a deputy, directing attention subtly toward weak points in the town's defenses. But his mind remained on the restrained figure at the center. The hidden warrior had been patient, but patience was always preparation for the moment when action became inevitable. The wind howled, scattering debris and dust, rattling lanterns and stirring shadows. The tension in the square had reached a palpable edge, every heartbeat echoing like a drum in the silence. The hidden warrior flexed his wrists once more, testing the ropes, feeling the strain, calculating the exact moment when his coiled energy would release. Every man in the square, every watcher on the ridges, every shadowed figure held their breath, anticipating a movement that none could yet fully imagine. The stage was set, the players poised, and the threads of fate had drawn tight. Clayton's authority hung by a fragile thread. The townsfolk trembled in the shadows, and Marathorn prepared to act. Her motives entwined with forces far beyond the town. Gideon Vark and Enoch Derrick waited, one with ambition, the other with loyalty, each uncertain of the first move. And at the center, bound yet unbroken, the hidden warrior waited, every fiber of his being alive with potential, patience, and deadly intent. The square fell into a tense silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Lanterns flickered in the darkness, shadows twisted unnaturally across the dusty streets, and the distant ridges carried the faint sound of movement. Every moment felt stretched, heavy with anticipation. Every eye, every ear, every instinct in Black Ridge braced for the storm that was about to break. The ropes strained as the hidden warrior shifted, a subtle movement that promised the coming eruption. Clayton raised his voice again, desperate to assert control, but his words were lost in the charged air. Mara's pulse raced, Silas's muscles tensed, and the unseen watchers on the ridges leaned forward, knowing instinctively that the moment had almost arrived. The first strike, the opening move, the spark that would ignite the night it was coming. And in that fragile electric moment, Black Ridge waited, suspended between fear and inevitability, on the edge of chaos. As the hidden warrior prepared to remind everyone why no one could truly restrain him, the night erupted with movement before anyone could fully react. The ropes that had bound the hidden warrior snapped under his sudden explosive force. He twisted and surged forward, a shadow in the lantern light, striking with a speed that left everyone gasping. Clayton Graves barked orders, but it was too late. Deputies scattered, stumbling over crates and each other, their coordination falling apart in the chaos. Dust swirled in the air, mingling with the flickering light, turning the square into a storm of motion and tension. The hidden warrior moved like a living force, every step calculated, every strike precise. Gideon Vark's horse reared as he tried to advance, but a deft kick from the warrior sent him sprawling to the ground. Silas Kane ducked behind a barrel, observing the flow of the battle, noting how each movement disrupted the plans of the men who thought themselves in control. Even Mara Thorne's eyes widened as she saw the culmination of the restraint that had seemed unbreakable moments before. Clayton charged toward the warrior, revolver drawn, but his confidence had dissolved into panic. The warrior deflected a swing, pivoting smoothly and disarming Clayton with a combination of skill and momentum that left the sheriff on his knees, dazed but unharmed. Enoch Derrick stepped from the shadows, moving to assist without interfering, allowing the warrior to demonstrate the full measure of his capability. For a moment, it seemed as if the town square itself had become a stage for a lesson, teaching the limits of fear, pride, and misplaced authority. The townsfolk, who had been hiding behind barrels and walls, began to emerge slowly, observing the scene with a mixture of awe and relief. Dust coated the wooden planks, and the air was thick with tension, but the danger had shifted, not disappeared. The hidden warrior, breathing steadily despite the effort, paused, surveying the square. He did not gloat, he did not celebrate. His focus was precise, measured. This was not chaos for its own sake. It was a demonstration of intent, a warning, and a reassurance that he had not come to destroy unnecessarily. Mara stepped forward cautiously, her voice carrying across the square. "It's over now," she said, steady but firm. "No one needs to get hurt anymore. Can end this tonight peacefully." The hidden warrior nodded slightly, acknowledging her intervention. Even in his intensity, he recognized her influence, the way her presence had shaped the unfolding events. Mara had seen through the tension and fear, and her words carried authority because she had earned it by observing, listening, and understanding. Gideon Vark rose to his feet, brushing dust from his clothes, and regarded the hidden warrior with a mixture of frustration and respect. He had come with intentions of bounty, of revenge, yet he realized in that moment that force alone could not dictate outcomes. The hidden warrior's skill and timing had rewritten the rules of engagement. Gideon's pride battled with his admiration, but ultimately he made a choice to step back, acknowledging the resolution without further bloodshed. Clayton Graves, though humbled, regained enough composure to speak. "You've proven yourself." "Beyond what I imagined," he admitted, his voice tight but sincere. "Black Ridge owes you more than words." The hidden warrior's expression softened slightly. He did not seek recognition or thanks, yet he understood the importance of this moment. Authority, pride, and fear had all collided, and through skill and restraint, the balance had shifted in a way that preserved life rather than destroyed it. Silas Kane moved closer, nodding at the warrior. "Knew you were different," he said quietly, "but seeing it, something else entirely. Black Ridge has been tested, and you've shown why some forces cannot be restrained." His words were met with a subtle acknowledgement from the warrior, a silent agreement that trust and respect had been earned through action rather than promise. The townsfolk began to relax, their fear giving way to a cautious hope. Whispers of the warrior's deeds spread quickly, but unlike before, there was no panic, no terror. Instead, the people of Black Ridge felt the weight of protection, a sense that their town had survived a storm that had threatened to overwhelm them. They realized that courage could come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the strongest forces were not those who ruled by fear, but those who acted with skill, patience, and purpose. Mara Thorne stepped forward again, this time addressing Clayton and the deputies. "Tonight, we saw what happens when control is taken for granted," she said. We've seen the strength of someone who has earned it through action and not through fear. Let's remember that as we move forward. Her words resonated with the crowd, planting seeds of understanding that would last far longer than the events of this single night. Even Gideon Vark, once a figure of potential violence, found a small smile. He had learned reluctantly that there was more to power than brute force, more to survival than chasing bounties, and that true skill commanded respect even in those who had sought to oppose it. Enoch Derrick, silently watching from the shadows, felt the satisfaction of a plan coming together without unnecessary destruction. Loyalty, skill, and patience had all proven decisive, and he understood that the hidden warrior had accomplished more than mere survival. He had reshaped the balance of Black Ridge. As the first light of dawn began to brush the horizon, the dust settled, and the town square slowly returned to calm. Horses stamped quietly, lanterns hung still, and the streets seemed almost peaceful for the first time in hours. The hidden warrior stood at the center, his posture relaxed yet commanding, a reminder that restraint had been a choice, and skill had been the deciding factor. Clayton Graves approached him, extending a hand not in submission but in acknowledgement of a hard-earned understanding. The warrior accepted the gesture with quiet dignity, signaling the end of conflict without triumphalism. Mara moved beside the hidden warrior, her eyes scanning the square. "You've protected more than yourself tonight," she said softly. "You've protected this town, and you've shown them that strength can be tempered with wisdom." The warrior nodded, letting the acknowledgement pass without words. Action had spoken louder than any speech could, and in this moment, the lesson was clear to all who had witnessed it. Silas Kane adjusted his hat and gave a small, satisfied nod. "Black Ridge will remember tonight," he said, "not because of fear, but because of courage and skill, and that's something worth honoring." The hidden warrior's eyes met Silas's briefly, a silent acknowledgement of shared respect and understanding. What had begun as tension, restraint, and threat had ended in clarity, resolution, and hope. Clayton Graves turned to the townsfolk, his voice now steady. "We have survived," he said. "We've seen the limits of fear, the value of caution, and the strength that comes from skill and patience. Let this be remembered not as a night of terror, but as a night where the right choices saved lives and preserved the town." His words carried weight, and the townsfolk felt relief and pride for the first time in what seemed like ages. The hidden warrior, now free of both ropes and immediate threat, did not linger unnecessarily. His purpose had been fulfilled. The town was safe, the balance restored, and the lessons of patience, courage, and vigilance had been firmly established. Yet even as he moved toward the edges of Black Ridge, there was an understanding in his eyes. The world was vast, the challenges unending, and his path of action and protection was far from over. Mara Thorne watched him leave, knowing that Black Ridge had been changed forever. People would speak of the night when the hidden warrior arrived, when fear met skill, and when tension transformed into hope. His presence had been a catalyst, his actions a reminder that courage and precision could shape outcomes in ways that fear and force never could. As the town returned to routine, the first rays of sunlight caught the rooftops and dust-filled streets, painting Black Ridge in warm hues of gold. Horses grazed quietly, the wind settled, and a sense of calm washed over the people who had faced the night's tension and emerged alive. Clayton Graves, Silas Kane, Mara Thorne, and even Gideon Vark reflected silently on the lessons learned, that control is fragile, patience is powerful, and courage can arrive unexpectedly when it is needed most. The hidden warrior disappeared into the rising sun, leaving behind only footprints, whispered stories, and a legacy that would endure. Black Ridge had been tested, conflict had been faced, and the threads of tension woven through the night had finally unraveled into a pattern of peace. The town was stronger, wiser, and united in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories are those achieved without unnecessary destruction. And that skill, courage, and timing could shape destinies as surely as any weapon. And so, Black Ridge breathed again, its people forever marked by the night when a restrained man became a hero through patience, precision, and an unwavering will. The lessons lingered, strength tempered by wisdom, vigilance balanced with restraint, and courage measured not by brute force, but by the clarity of action.